Welcome to the first podcast in a series of interviews with people in the field of climate change and migration. Our aim is to inform as many young people of the interconnections between climate change and migration. The podcasts are created in the context of the project End Climate Change, Start Climate of Change by the University of Nicosia Research Foundation. Our first invited speaker is Ms. Katja Saha, UNHCR representative in Cyprus. Ms. Saha arrived in the Republic of Cyprus from the Director's Office in Amman, Jordan in July 2018. She has worked with UNICEF Spain from 1998 to 2003 and joined UNHCR in Syria in 2003. She has held several positions with UNHCR IDP and refugee operations in the Middle East, Africa, Latin America, and Europe, including regional responsibilities, covering Latin America and Southeast Europe at the UNHCR headquarters in Geneva from 2011 to 2015. Katja, hello, and thank you for being with us today.
Hello, and thank you so much for the invitation.
So because we are trying to speak to our audiences, I think it's to our younger audiences, I think it's very important to put things in context regarding what you feel is the impact of climate change on displaced populations.
Well, it's a very relevant topic to UNHCR and understanding the magnitude of displacement. I think that's a good starting point. At the moment, we're dealing with over 80 million, 82.4 million displaced persons around the world. And it's good to remember that 80% of these individuals, they come from countries that are really bearing the brunt of the climate change. These are countries that are heavily impacted by climate change. On the other hand, the countries that host them, the asylum countries, are also the ones that are mainly in the developing countries. So it is really 86% of displaced individuals are hosted in the developing world. And of course, these countries are the least prepared to tackle the impact of climate change. And they are less resilient and they're unprepared to deal with these additional task of providing protection and livelihoods for the high number of displaced persons.
Yeah, that is indeed a high number. Where specifically do you see this impact mostly of climate change on displaced people? I mean, the details of how that occurs and from where.
The climate change it's really impacting the displacement all around the world, and I think it's good to understand that first. The climate change is often combined with situations of social tensions, religious issues. It creates competition for very scarce resources. So it is this kind of interplay between the climate change, tensions, the unpreparedness of the country to deal with these kind of situations. So it catalyzes displacement as such. And this is, of course, happening in many parts of Sahel, where we, for example, see very drastic situations of 3 million displaced persons, 1 million of them in Burkina Faso, with extremely high temperatures, with very severe impact of the climate change, with very little resources to. And this is really kind of a ground that foments tension, and it's also then easy for actors to come in and start exploiting this kind of population that is really struggling for the survival. And so forced recruitment is one phenomenon that is linked to these kind of situations with climate change and tensions. And also, once these displacements happen, then we have situations where these communities are the most impacted. by climate change again. So in many regions, talking about for example, Afghanistan with the very high numbers of internally displaced people suffering from a food crisis that's also related to the climate change, talking about the dry corridor in Latin America impacting 6 different countries, also combined with the organized crime, with the gang violence, with displacement. So when these displaced populations then try to find places that could provide them for better resources, better living conditions, they often find themselves in equally difficult circumstances where the hosting governments do not necessarily include them in the planning, in the preparedness, in finding solutions for them. So they're more vulnerable than the local population often. And finally, the climate change, it also makes it very difficult to return, whereas a voluntary return to the country of origin has traditionally been the preferred and most feasible solution for most. It now also is impacted by the climate change. Some of the areas where these populations originate from, they have become entirely inhabitable. So it is no longer possible to return. And for those who then opt to return again, we see these similar scenarios of insufficient resources, and it leads to also more unwelcoming attitudes on behalf of the welcoming communities that find that the return of those who already left is again enhancing the difficulties and the insufficiency of resources.
Okay, so in addition to all of these social issues which occur, we can definitely therefore say that climate change leads to, and there's a direct link therefore to this displacement. How do you see the trend of this? I mean, what's the trajectory of this in the near future? Is there anything that we can say about that? How and in which way is this leading towards?
Well, in the past decade, the individuals who have been displaced by climate-related challenges, it has the numbers have increased constantly. We talk about over 20 million per year. And now in last year, we already saw over 30 million people displaced due to climate-related situations. So absolutely, the time is running out, and we do need to see much more important action than before if we do want to have a meaningful impact on these growing numbers.
Yeah. And UNHCR, what's the strategy in addressing the impact of climate change towards these displaced populations?
Well, we have worked with the displaced populations. We have 70 years of experience in the field, and I think we have the comparative advantage of being one of the largest humanitarian organizations in the world, with some 18,000 staff spread across 132 countries. So we are already there. We work in one of the most complex and inhospitable areas of the globe, and we have seen how the displacement is impacted by climate, and how the environment is impacted on the other hand by displacement. So we have quite actively worked for the past 20 years on environmental management, and really trying to find ways to reduce the impact of this hosting of large number of people in a very reduced area that often leads to the degradation of the environment. Now we have a more formal approach. We have a strategic framework for our climate action, and it is built around 3 different pillars. One is more relevant to our protection function, our legal and technical expertise that we provide to the governments and to the communities that are impacted by climate change. So we try to advise on the development of legal and strategic frameworks that are relevant to displacement and climate change. And for example, it can be very concrete as well. We can advise governments on more planned relocation of populations from areas that no longer are suitable for hosting them. The second pillar, it's more about our operations. That's the concrete work that we do in the field with our partners and with the communities. And there we have, of course, a variety of different tasks that we undertake. During disasters, we provide very direct humanitarian assistance. And for displaced populations in camps, we work with the water management, with clean energy. That's very important for us. Still, 90% of those hosted in refugee camps do not have access to clean, sustainable energies. And we work we have, for example, reforestation programs. We try to make sure that there is no negative impact on the local environment resulting from these population movements. And finally, we of course look at our own organizational carbon footprint. So we have this internal process of greening the UNHCR, where we look at very carefully at our own use of energy and efficiency. In Cyprus, of course, UNHCR does not have an operational role. We are here mainly to do advocacy and to assist the government to tackle these very important challenges caused by these increased movements, mixed movements of migrants and asylum seekers to Cyprus. But still, we have, for example, planted an important number of trees in the regular reception center, and we really try to encourage the authorities to make sure that the settlements that are the reception centers that are being built also do consider the environmental impact, and on the other hand, that they would not be in hospitable places with very high temperatures during the summer, but that they would also provide shade and areas that are more conducive for the well-being of those hosted.
Yes. Okay. And because we're sort of just finishing with COP26, and it has received mixed reviews depending on different, I guess, age groups, it seems. And was there any call to action from UNHCR for COP26?
Absolutely. We had a very active participation, and what we do ask for is that half of the resources that are allocated for climate change related actions, they would really go to enhance the adaptability of those countries that are at the forefront and that are really hosting the 86% of this world's refugees and displaced persons. It's absolutely crucial that we work on the resilience and that we can plan and we can assist those that are currently the least prepared, those that contribute the least to the climate change, but who are really bearing the cost and the consequences of this climate change in combination of their role of hosting the displaced population.
Okay. It's fair to say that more action needs to be taken to alleviate climate emergency impacts on the displaced. Do you have a message for our younger audiences? Is there something that they can do or we can do as a smaller community here in Cyprus, for example? Is there something that you would like to leave with our younger audiences listening here today?
Well, I think it's important to understand that the climate change, it's not something that's impacting others somewhere else. It is really having now an impact all around the globe, and there is not one single country that will be unaffected by the changes that it causes. And I think it's important to understand that it's a human crisis that really impacts all of us. We are all part of nature, and without really fomenting that kind of a link and understanding that we are part of everything, and everything that we do will have an impact on the future of our children and the coming generations. So I think it's important to keep that in mind when we consume and when we decide what kind of energies we use, and it's really it should be part of these daily considerations. And of course, I mean, in Cyprus we do see high numbers of displaced persons seeking for protection, and I think it's important to understand that how the climate change has impacted on their lives and on their need to move forward to seek for a better future, and so it's absolutely crucial. And I don't think that there is any time left for thinking and for talking and for small scale projects. And now it should really be the encompassing theme in everything that we do.
Okay, Katja, thank you so much for your time. This has been a podcast interview with Ms. Katja Saha. And the aim of this project is End Climate Change, Start Climate of Change. And it's to raise awareness of young EU citizens in the critical understanding of migration caused by climate change, as it is considered one of the biggest challenges in the world. Through the implementation of the project, the Research Foundation of the University of Nicosia aims to inform the young citizens of Cyprus about the relationship between the economic system in which we live in, our way of life, and the human impact on climate change in the world south. The project is funded by the European Commission under the programme Development, Education and Awareness Raising, DEAR, of the European Union. And for more information on the project, you can go to climatechange.info/Cyprus. My name is Nicoli, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.